Hi. So this is the third lecture. I'm a bit tired, but lunch is going to be soon, so we'll speed this up, okay? And coffee and everything else. So you'll be happy, energized after this. As always, a test question for start. Who uses Google Analytics on a daily basis? Daily, that's a tricky one, yes, okay. So who uses Google Analytics? Okay, so just another trick questions for what? What do you use it for? Yes. I mean, just to look at it because it's shiny, it has many colors in it, many numbers, so it can be a nice tool to use, especially in the morning. And if you use this real time, then it goes up and down and things like that. Yes, please. Digital marketing, okay. So it's a tool that measures user behavior, and in return, it can offer some kind of an answer. Does your marketing perform good or bad? Or can it perform better, and so on? But most importantly, it doesn't do only that. It helps you understand user behavior. What the users actually do on your site. So if you want to say what part of the site is used and in which way, then Google Analytics is used for that specific purpose. Now, if you see numbers in Google Analytics, okay, we'll wait just a sec. Thanks. So when you see numbers in Google Analytics as a tool, so we've said what kind of a tool it is, a tool that measures digital marketing, that measures user behavior. Do you trust that tool? Let's say it says you have 10,000 users acquired per month. Is it an accurate number? No? Why is it not an accurate number? If a person comes twice on the site, then it's basically only one user. So multiple sessions for a specific user will only... that's a different thing, yes. That's cross-device behavior, which Google Analytics is kind of stupid in understanding. It basically doesn't understand that kind of behavior. It basically means that a person that comes to a site via, let's say, a mobile device, then a desktop, it basically means two users. Completely different user behavior and everything else. Yes, please.
If you're logging in, if he's logged or she logged in into the Google account,
still two users. Google account is something irrelevant to Google Analytics, basically. Google authorization and everything else, Facebook authorization and things like that, do not have any kind of a meaning to Google Analytics. There is a specific feature for Google Analytics which says that if you can identify a user via your, I don't know, what do you call it, CRM, something like that, then in this case, and supply Google Analytics with a user ID, which is a specific user identification for a user, then in this case, you can measure cross-device behavior. But these are specific cases. So in terms of, let's say, your website sites, do you expect a user to log in? No. Then in this case, it's much more applicable to apps, mobile apps, let's say shops where you have frequent habit of purchasing something. Then in this case, it makes sense. But in case of, let's say, charters and everything else, it doesn't really make sense. And you cannot expect things to be measured in that way. Now, there is something new happening. It's going to be live next year, I believe, that Google is going to provide a user count on a specific new way of how do they acquire this data. It's called Google Signals. Now, with Google Signals, Google is going to try to determine that a specific user is going to be tied in a specific persona, independent of what device do they use. So in terms of user count and everything else, you can expect the user count to be much more accurate from next year. One other thing, it's basically a free advice thing. So from next year, or let's say from tomorrow, you should use the new version of Google Analytics. Not only the old one, but the new one as well. Because usually Google tends to deprecate old features and old analytics and everything else. So a free advice and a very good advice is to start collecting data in a new Google Analytics property. It's called A plus Web, App plus Web properties, and it's probably going to be a new standard from next year. Yes? App plus web, so application plus web properties. So these are the new Google Analytics properties which offer combined tracking of mobile applications and web sites in one single view. It's a completely new infrastructure. It's going to be much faster, much more reliable, and so on and so on. But from a technical side, just talk to your developers and make sure that everything is tagged with a new way of tracking and collecting data. I'm not saying that the old Google or current Google Analytics is going to be deprecated now, but you can expect that things are going to change, let's say, in Google terms, 1 to 2 years, something like that. So be prepared for that as well. So whatever we are talking now in this lecture, the second one is going to be more in-depth inside Google Analytics, but this is a talk on how to prepare Google Analytics to measure anything, because it's not that simple. So the first thing that you need to understand is once you collect something in Google Analytics, it cannot be changed. Okay, so nothing you can do will change historic data. So in essence, it's quite important that once you start measuring, you start doing it correctly. Because if you change anything in mid-term, let's say you start measuring something in January and you want to change something in May, which significantly changes how you measure transactions, conversions, and everything else, you will lose the ability to compare. And in Google Analytics, the comparison is basically the first thing that you do on a daily, on a weekly, on a monthly basis. Compare year over year, season over season, quarter over quarter, and so on. So this is the first method that you do inside Google Analytics. So make sure that once you start measuring, you are doing it correctly. So the question now, who does the implementation part? Because Google Analytics doesn't work if it's not implemented. There needs to be some kind of a code placed on your site and needs to be on all pages so that it works. Yes? No, not at this point, but I will later on. Okay, so what's essential is that you as, I would say, mostly business people, does anyone do here any kind of programming? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, hi. For everyone else, Google Analytics is a development tool. It's also a marketing tool which helps you do all of the things that we mentioned before, but it's first and foremost, it's a developer-centric tool. So it's JavaScript, it's code. So don't mess with it because a lot of things can go wrong. And if you want to measure something, then measure it properly, measure it accurately. So your task, everything that you do with Google Analytics, aside from reporting, is to inform your developers, I want to measure this and that. I want to measure a specific interaction, I want to measure a conversion, I want to measure something that happens on my website or in mobile application. But don't do the measurement by yourself if you are not 100% sure that you can do it accurately. So you are doing business requirements. The developers do the technical ones. So make sure your scope is different than theirs. Okay, so I'll skip this part, the introduction. This doesn't work. Okay. Everything that we do with Google Analytics is basically to measure this cycle. So this is a purchase cycle, a simple one, because it has multiple touch points, multiple mediums where we get in touch with the offer, with the service. It starts with a person, ends with a, let's say, starts with an idea or a need, and ends with a purchase, hopefully. 1% of time, basically, as the conversion rates are probably somewhere around 1% on your websites. Now, just a question. Can we track all of these interactions? No? Which ones can we? Yeah, it's quite hard. It's almost impossible, especially for small volume customers and things like that. Before, let's say, a couple of years, the only thing that we could and we had measured is this part, the last click, last thing that happened prior to a conversion. And it's a bad thing to do because you forget most of the other marketing spend that you actually have inside a year. So SEO, TV, offline, and everything else. So the point is, are we doing a good job? Yes, but it's full of gaps. So Google Analytics is not an accurate tool in terms of, let's say, measuring all of the touch points inside the purchase cycle, but we can measure some of them. It's better to know, let's say, at least half of the story than only one single point of it. So our task in Google Analytics is to measure the most of the touch points that we can collect meaning digital touch points, websites, clicks on ads, I don't know, mobile apps and things like that. And in return, we can see which one of those attributes to a conversion is in this process, is present in the process. Okay, so for the next slide, what seems to be the problem is that all of these funnels, the purchase cycles, are leaking on multiple places. We have leakage on the advertising side. We advertise on stupid things, on stupid keywords, on stupid audiences. I'm focusing on the word stupid because it is, and we are quite unaware of the fact on what are we spending on. So it's not only a question of keywords, these are audiences, most usually in terms of GDN, the display advertising part, where we advertise to a wide variety of people, hoping that they're going to click on an ad and purchase something. But it usually doesn't happen. It doesn't. Now, what our task as, let's say, analysts or someone who is taking care of a business is to plug all of those leaks. Now, these leaks can happen, aside from the ad campaigns, it can happen on the site as well. So we've talked in the last lecture about some of the issues that you may have on your website, like content, like processes, like funnels and things like that. But one of the main things that we need to take care of, let's say on a charter site, what kind of a process does a user have to perform or have to fill out some kind of a form in order to book a charter? What's the most important thing that he or she can do on a site? Calendar, yes. Availability, basically. Do I have a specific service available with these specific items in line? So out of all of your sites, are you happy with the process? Is it always performing at its best? Is it always giving out results? Is it? Not really, yeah. What's usually the point is that we expect the forms to perform well, but they usually don't. So a good practice for all of you who are owners of a website, you should perform the desired actions that the user has to take on the site by yourself. You have to know your site quite well and test edge cases. Can I book for 2022? No? Okay, that's one of the things. What happens once a product is not available or a service is not available? What happens then? Sorry, what? You could use the client or something else happens, but there's probably an error. No available product, services, and everything else. So what do you do then? Nothing. Okay. So in this case, there are multiple things that you can do, which do not lie in Google Analytics, but they can tell a story. You can say in some specific cases, let's say, I search for a specific product or a service, and then I get a 0 result search page. So no products available, no services available for this specific search. Dates, boat, and everything else. What can I do on the site to increase the conversion rates? Send us an inquiry, okay. Provide alternatives, like other charter agencies, something like that. Why not? Contact agent and things like that. So these are all the things that you can, let's say, test afterwards. But in Google Analytics, you can see that there is a problem with that. That there is a high exit rate on these pages, on search results pages and things like that. So a metric is, let's say, exit page rate in terms of, or exit rate, in terms of the search page result. Result page is the most often exit page on your website, which can then be interpreted in a way that we need to perform some additional optimization on that specific page to reduce this exit page rate. In terms of, let's keep them on the site, let's give them some kind of an information, or let's say a utility, in terms of that they can perform a lead, they can perform some kind of an action to stay on the site. So the point is not to acquire a lead, but to acquire user interest. In terms of just get them to sign in, either with an email or a phone number or something in this case, so you can contact them directly. Why is direct marketing, direct contact so valuable? It's extremely powerful because you can personalize everything and everything else. What else? It's probably cheap. It's costly to acquire, but it's cheap to maintain afterwards, basically, because the point is just get their email and everything else is quite easy to do. If you do the segmentation and everything else properly in newsletters and things like that. Who uses newsletter or email as a channel? Okay, who does email segmentation? Okay, with any success? I do. Thanks, Pashko, I know you do, yes. So in this case, these are all the items, all the tools that you can use in order to increase efficiency. Now, the results of all of this can be, in return, tracked in Google Analytics. So all of your newsletters, emails, transactional emails, and everything else, the efficiency of all of these channels can be tracked in Google Analytics. So you can see if a certain, let's say, newsletter audience is performing at a high level. So conversion rate, leads, and everything else which happens on the site. So plug the leaks. One other thing, lead forms. You probably have just a couple of items that a user needs to fill, right? Email address, phone number, message, and something else. Can it be more complex? Yes? Should it be more complex? No? Okay. Do people tend to create errors or issues with those simple forms? You don't think so, or you know they don't? Uh-huh. You try. Spam, okay.
Yeah, I try to create false ones just to...
Uh-huh. You're tricky, okay. Yeah, that also makes sense. And most of the users do these kinds of things. But forms, in most of the cases, pass a certain process. It's called validation. So if a user entered an email, if they entered an email correctly, if the phone number is correct, does it contain enough numbers? Does it contain letters, which it shouldn't be the case? So in this case, there is always this validation process. So what's usually an error is that we tracked intent in terms of clicking on submit form, submit lead, but we are not tracking the lead success, which is quite a different thing. Let's say, for example, when you are doing any kind of retail purchasing on the web. In most cases, we have seen that people are often creating errors in the fields which are zip codes. They either don't know what their zip code really is, or they just use some kind of a dummy number which doesn't make sense at all. Zip codes, it's a simple thing. And we expect the users to understand these fields, to fill it out with ease and everything else, but it's always an issue of what actually happens with the end user. They are, I strongly believe that you are going to be much more successful if you think about your user when creating forms that they are actually quite stupid. No, really, it is the case. And as simple as you can create the form, the better. So less fields, much simple fields, predefined values and everything else. It would help much more with the form process to be filled out positively, correctly, and in a speedy manner. So fast enough and accurately. Because if not, if you give them more options, free input and things like that, more errors can basically be done. Fast typing, typing on mobile is quite inefficient. It's basically not a good device to work with any forms. So in this case, just make it simple. This is one of the whole plugin things. One additional thing. So this here, I know it's colorful and it doesn't really mean something. It's how Google Analytics tracks an e-commerce sale. So this is a path to purchase. This is one person, one transaction. One person, one transaction. It's an edge case. It's not an usual case. But the point is, these are the users today. They will not purchase at a single session, at the first session that they come to the site. They're probably going to visit your site multiple times, and they're going to be undecisive. Why? Because they have options. Yeah, they always have options. There's always going to be someone who is cheaper than you, who has better images, better videos, and everything else. Even though you think they see you as a great competitor, great agency, great service, and everything else, it always comes to options. So this is where the first impressions come into play. So basically, you have to generate this kind of a first impression. If not, this is probably gonna happen. So there are gonna be multiple visits, multiple sessions, which can happen in order for the user to finally decide. This kind of a user is probably someone you should do a negative audience for. I don't want this kind of a purchase, let's say purchase persona to come to this site because it's too expensive. Multiple clicks, multiple sessions, probably multiple chats, multiple emails, and everything else. This is a problematic issue lead. We're probably going to remove those from the cycle. But the point is we can measure all of this. So this is called cross-channel behavior. So this is not cross-device, this is cross-channel behavior. Yes?
But if they're coming to organic search, you're not paying.
Yeah, you're basically not. Well, you are.
Paying with the
You are.
in the organic.
Yes, yes, yes. So some people say SEO is free. It's definitely not. Yeah, SEO should always be taken care of with the cost of upkeep of the entire site, at least a part of it, plus all of the content that you write on the site. Images, production, actors, I don't know, drones, someone mentioned it yesterday. It's basically all, at least a part of it is an SEO cost. So it's definitely not free. Okay, so cross-channel behavior and how does it act on the website and what do you need to take care of? This is traffic which is generated on your site on high level. So there are 4 main groups of traffic which you acquire on the site. And all of these, let's say, groups need to be taken care of in a way. In some cases, you're probably not going to do social media because it's difficult. Managing pages, managing clients on social media, it's troublesome. You probably need to take, I don't know, lessons in people skills and everything else to manage these kinds of queries. But the point is, all of these need to be present. Why? Because the user is present on multiple networks, on multiple places. And you cannot allow yourself not to be present in specific parts of decision making. It's hard, it's expensive, but it's needed. So the question is, where are you currently at? So let's say the own media is the simple one, is the SEO part. It's your site. It's probably in a way even your Facebook page or Facebook content that you generate, even your YouTube channel. That's your. But in some cases, it's your hosting, it's your content, you have full control, and in some cases, it's just semi-control in terms of YouTube, Facebook, and things like that, because that's a different platform. That's someone else's platform. You own a part of the content, but it's someone else's platform. Now, this part is long-term. SEO is long-term. You cannot do swift changes with SEO. This doesn't really happen. So if you want to push something in terms of last minute, first minute, early booking, late booking, and things like that, SEO is not the way to go with this. There are other channels, other traffic sources which are responsible for this. In this case, paid. So the issue with paid is once you pay, it's active. Once you don't pay, it just disappears. It's not the same thing with own media because SEO is, let's say, consistent in a way. There is a correlation. There is always a correlation. Once you push more paid media, you can expect that the organic will also increase. I'm not talking about brand campaigns. I'm talking about generic campaigns, generic keywords, and things like that. Because brand campaigns in PPC and organic are cannibalizing each other. So you're basically paying for what you should get in any case. But the point is, competition can always bid on your keywords, and then you have an issue. Then you have this part, the earned media and the shared one. So these two are most difficult to obtain. Why? The earned part, because you have to put a lot of effort in earned media to actually earn the trust of a specific user for them to create user-generated content which will talk positively about you, even negatively. The point is that you need to generate some kind of an engagement with the user and the brand. Testimonials, Instagram is a specific case for earned media where you get some kind of a, let's say, outpost, like a brand outpost from an influencer or someone like that who is going to talk positively about the experience that I have with your charter. That's quite important because it's rich in presentation. It has text with images, with hashtags and everything else. So it's quite important to obtain this kind of traffic. The key is most of these things can be tracked in Google Analytics and should be tracked in Google Analytics. Now the issue is to determine what kind of a percentage of each of these traffic, let's say, groups is needed for a site to succeed. So there's no formula for that. It depends on all of your positioning, current positioning. Are you new in the market? Are you a well-known brand? Do you have an SEO which is, let's say, quite high on the market? Are you an old domain, new project, old project, and things like that? Let's say for a case, you have a new market, let's say North Africa, something like that. You are quite new to the market. No one knows about you. The whole industry is quite new to the market. Then in this case, this part, the SEO part is not going to work. So in this case, paid media should probably be around 70–80% of the traffic share that you generate on the site. In terms of, let's say, high competition area, where you have, let's say, like Germany, which is, I don't know, Netherlands, which are quite known with this industry, there is high competition and everything else. This share is probably going to be a bit lower, but the point is that owned media can also produce results. The SEO part will do some of the work. But if the competition is high in terms of search, in this case, paid media will not only be the search part of campaigns, but also display and YouTube and other ways of producing paid user acquisition. Okay, but in terms of what you need to have, I would say almost all. Google Analytics usage. So you said you use it for reporting, for determining, let's say, the main things about user behavior and everything else. We use it on a daily basis, let's say on a minute basis, on an hourly basis. We use it for this. So Google Analytics is used for segments and audiences. So you want to see how a specific segment of users is performing in return for conversions or user behavior on the site. Do they search? They search for a specific item. What part of day do they search for, and anything else. So we use this information from Google Analytics to learn more about the user and user experience. How this experience basically ends, positively or negatively. Then the goals part and the measurement part. We already talked about conversions. So each site has one or more conversions, main ones or micro ones. So the main ones are what brings you money. The micro ones, the minor conversions, are all of those that show that the user has a great interest in what you offer. So once a person searches for something, clicks on search results, views a product or let's say a boat or something like that, they show a higher level of interest for a specific product. If you compare that to a person that just comes to the site, any page, but does not do any kind of interaction on the site, scrolls, clicks on an image to enlarge, let's say, a boat or something like that, they do not show this additional interest in a specific service. So you can basically scorecard your users based on the type of interaction that they use or do on the site. And on the other hand, because these two tools are natively integrated, so you don't have to be a programmer to do that, there is a couple of clicks which should be performed in order to connect these two tools. So let's say the most common use cases, I want to push Google Analytics audiences, so people who have performed a specific action on the site, and I want to bid more on these people in Google Ads, who have shown more interest, who have shown more engagement on the site itself. So it would say to me, okay, these people are more interested, let's say spend more on them. rather than on those who bounced on the site who didn't show any kind of interest at all. Okay, so analytics needs to be implemented, yes. In case of, let's say, you, as you are more business people, this is the only part that you need to be aware of. So this is a link that you provide to your developers with a question. I need to track something in terms of a click, a view, something like that. So you pose a question, they give the answer based on this documentation. You will have the link inside the presentation, so you don't have to. Yes, because it's going to be hard to retype, but it's the link will be provided in the presentation. So you give the developers the instructions, but you give the business case as well. So on a specific site, I want to measure this and that. So this is your task. Okay. So what does actually Google Analytics collect? By default, it only collects page views. So when a person comes to a site, only one page, and then another page, another page, another page, and so on and so on. With this information, Google Analytics then calculates everything else. Number of users, number of sessions, every session duration, bounce rates, and everything else. But if you just place the code on the site, the basic one, the only thing that you can actually see is the user behavior in terms of what pages does a user actually view once inside the session. No conversions, well, you can create a conversion, but it's only dependent on the page views if a person visits a key page. Much more, let's say, valuable things are when you start tracking events. And this is where it becomes interesting, basically. So, do you have any volunteers to just say what their web address is, domain, so we can check their site and what to measure on their site? Aha, you don't have one. Okay, you raised your hand. Yeah, your website is? Ocean Sailing? OceanSailingHouse.com. Okay. Ocean Sailing. Cookies. Okay. So, is this a good site? It looks nice. Okay. It's beautiful, yeah. Lots of images, right? How big is this image? You need to check that because it can be quite large. It is? Then good work then. The first thing when you are an analyst or let's say marketing consultant or you want to do a campaign is basically check the quality of the site. What does it offer? What kind of content do you have? And what do you want to measure as success? So on this site, let's say we are going to follow two routes. The first one is to create the macro conversion. What's the main function of the site? And the second one is basically items then we want to track in addition to this, which will show the users which are more engaged than the average. What kind of interactions that I can do on the site, so we can see which one of those is more interesting to us. So, any volunteers? So the macro conversion is what? Send inquiry. Can you book directly, pay directly on the site or not? No, just send inquiry based on the search part. Okay. So let's say I get to sailing or any. So the date's gonna be today. Okay, first issue. This is not clear enough. Day. This is like credit card, right? This is something like that. So let's say 10. Will this work? Try. Okay. Hmm. Thanks for visiting. Sorry, it looks like that our search engine didn't offer results matching your criteria. Okay, cool. It doesn't really matter. It's 2020, but it's fine. So this is the main conversion. Once successfully submitting basically the form, we will measure a conversion. So this is the thing that you need to tell to your developers. We need to measure this as a conversion. This, on the other hand, should not be measured as a conversion. So do not measure clicks, because clicks do not do anything. And this is, let's say, the most usual mistake that people do on the sites. They measure clicks. And as you can see here, nothing happens once you click if you didn't fill out the form correctly. Okay, what else can we measure here? Sorry, searches, queries, and everything else, which is quite more important. This is basically, you are asking the users what they are interested in terms of where do they want to go, what kind of a boat do they prefer, how many days do they want to spend, and everything else. And it's almost free. You are asking them as very specific questions, what do you want? And they have to answer in a very specific way. Because if you can't get it, then it's probably not going to generate any kind of a result.
But once they fill out the form and get the thank you,
Yes?
the goal,
Yes, it can be. It can be. So only form submit success, basically. So just a question. Can you collect this information inside Google Analytics? Can you know all of these specifics inside Google Analytics? No? Yes, you can. And that's probably the most valuable information that you can get inside Google Analytics. It's not that a person performed a search, but what kind of a search did they perform? So each one of these items, let's say yacht type, date, you'll probably do month and year, so not the specific date. Duration, flexibility, yeah, sure. And then the search part. So each of these items can be a specific dimension. What can you do with these dimensions, with these values? Yes?
see which are the popular periods and which are not.
Exactly
Like
that.
discounts or raise prices.
Exactly that. So the first thing is basically have the understanding of what to do for a specific market, what kind of a package do they want, use it in advertising and everything else. So quite valuable information. Then the other thing that can be done is basically create audiences based on this. So when you do remarketing audiences, do you know what the concept of remarketing is? Once a person gets on a site, they give you some kind of information of what they are interested in, then you run a specific campaign just for them. And in this case, when someone searches for, let's say, what kind of a yacht is it? Let's say sailing yacht for, let's say, May, for 7 days, then you can add this to an ad. An ad can contain this information, so you are quite specific and personalized in terms of return to our page with this specific offer. We have something special for you. If you can do that, probably a promo code or something like that which you can offer in return, just please come back. We know what you want, we have it, we have a promo code for you, just get back to us. Because it's much easier to do that than to do a spray and pray kind of a method where you just push advertising out without any personalization at all. We have sailing yachts. Okay, fine, everyone else has that. But if you can get specific, just definitely do it. Okay, what else can you do here? What else can be tracked here? We are not now talking about trending data here. We are now talking about attributes for a specific search. We are talking about audiences in Google Ads, but what else can we do here? What else can we track? Time? Location? Okay, what else?
Can we measure when somebody is ready to put the query, but then finally doesn't press the search?
Yes. You can measure form interaction in terms of a person has interacted with this field, with this field, with this field, but they didn't touch this one. So you can also do that. But the point is it...
For example, now, for this problem with the date,
Mhm.
let's say that this is a technical problem which arises today,
Mhm.
then you could easily see that something wrong with your form because people are finding it difficult to complete the... So
Okay.
If you have the information just like you don't have any more queries,
Okay.
okay, that's something. But if you see that they put the yacht type, but then they never interact with the date, or finally they do, but then they don't press search, there's something wrong in the form. Just for the information.
Yes, that can also be the case. The point is that you're not only going to track success. Success is one thing, which is going to happen or not. There's a 50-50 chance for each visit, each attempt. But in this case, what you can send, or let's say, track in Google Analytics are the errors. 0 search results, so no availability for a specific date. So you want to see, can I get a partner offer or something like that in terms of a specific campaign? Okay, I have a new agreement for this month, for this geographic area, for everything else. This is the, let's say, region for where there is demand, but I don't have anything inside now. Once I fill up in my booking manager or whatever, I have now the supply for this specific service, then I can run a campaign for it based on errors, based not on success, but on errors. One additional thing. So this email, this part, is basically, you can do a pre-fill, you can do whatever you want. But the point is, in how many times did an error occur when a person tried to fill up the form? Track errors. That's definitely an option. What can you do once this is a highly, it's not a bad form, basically it's a simple form here, but what can you do with the user when they have an error inside the form? Simplify the form, that's the first thing. What else?
Add directions or advice for how to put it in.
Yes, maybe also that. What else?
Send them email straight away so they have to confirm the registration, and then you have, if they get it, or if he doesn't get it, then he knows he.
Okay, what else? Chatbots, chat windows, everything else, call line. Basically anything that you can do on the site which will prevent the user to leave immediately. Just give them additional channels, give them options in this way. So once they try to fill up the form and they didn't succeed with it, just give them additional options to contact you. So do not lose them in this part, because this is the end of the funnel. This is the last part that they have to do. If you lose them here, then it's a wasted opportunity, basically. And it's a really big wasted opportunity in this case, because you were so close, and then a technical thing or let's say a lack of time for a lack of interest of a user has made this bad session, bad user experience in a way. So just push mobile things in it and so on and so on. So there is a case also in travel where people did some different thing than usual. So on mobile, have you ever tried to book something in travel on mobile device? Was it an easy experience? No, it's somewhere it is, somewhere it's not. Some booking engines in travel have an extremely bad user experience with the booking engine, with the end part of the cycle. So the presentation part is excellent. Images, prices, and everything else. Then you get to a booking part when you have to fill out so many items inside that it's, let's say, sick to do. It takes a lot of time, there are too many errors that can happen, and so on. So what did the hotels do in this case? They didn't push people to get to the booking engine, but they pushed the people to get to a call center. And everything was done for them via a call. So you don't have to do any kind of typing. You just have a pleasant conversation with a call operator which says, okay, you need to give me your name, your surname, and everything else. We will prepare the entire offer for you. Send a link with exact pre-filled information inside an email. You just click on it, enter your credit card details, and you are ready to go. Or they already have that. So it's a much easier and much more pleasant user experience for the end user than just pushing this kind of a volume to a booking engine, which is, as you are aware of it, if it's complex, if there are many errors, just push it via a different route. So maybe it's not a question of simplifying the form and everything else, because users tend to, I don't know, be impatient, hectic, they do not care, they just want to give you your email, they don't trust you with the information, or they don't want to give you the information, and so on. So aside from changing the form, just give them another option to contact you. It's probably going to be much easier. The investment is not that high. Implementing a chatbot or something like this is not that complex as it used to be, but the point is it doesn't have to be automated. It can even be Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, things like that. Just push some additional things that you can help the user fill out this form completely. Okay, what else can we measure on the site? Or what should be measured on the site? Interaction with the menu. Okay. The interaction with the menu is already known in a way because the end result of interacting with the menu is the rendering of a page. So you click on an item, you get to a page. The page information is basically supplied if you have the standard code on the site. So each transition and everything else is already known. But there are some pages which are more valuable than the other ones, right? So if, let's say, a person comes to this site, what is the point that we can say that the person is interested in something? Aside from searching the availability part. Sorry? Okay, one thing, something else? Okay, but in this case, let's say, so let's do a fleet. So this page, let's say it's a boat, and we have a hashtag of price. It's basically a tag, an anchor on the site where we have pricing for each of the, let's say, date ranges, yes. In this case, we can say that the person is definitely interested in a specific thing. If you know, in SEO or in PPC, there is a term long tail, which is basically a quite defined phrase for a specific item that someone is searching for. So it's not Charter Croatia, it's Charter Croatia split this date and so on and so on. So it's quite specific. It tells a quite specific intent on what the person is searching for. So in this case, in a way, we have asked the person, what are you interested for? And as an answer, we have this person is interested for a Lagoon 620 and for a specific price. You can learn all of this just by looking at the URL. And this person is probably much more valuable than having a person come to the homepage and doing absolutely nothing. Because we don't know why this person has come to the site at all. He's just come to the homepage, he didn't do any kind of interaction at all. So we don't know the user's intent. By URL, by the interactions, we define, okay, these are engaged when we can define intent. If we can't define intent, then it's basically a user without any purpose at all. We cannot retarget them, we cannot measure their behavior because there is no behavior to actually measure. So in this case, these are the two specific segments that we want to create. So either visiting a key page or doing a specific interaction on the site. So in case of this, so someone mentioned the menu, the interactions with the menu, but what I'm more interested about is do they actually do this, tab browsing. So we are on the same page, but we are actually changing the content on the site. What can you learn from this? This kind of behavior. Exactly that. What else? Which content is not interesting, so we can remove it as well. So it takes up loading time, it takes up space, real estate, screen real estate, and everything else. So why is it even here? If we remove it, nothing's going to happen. We'll probably reduce the page size, and in return, we'll probably have page load, which is decreased. Not by a lot, but little by little, you will have a much better page loading time, in a way. What else? You can also test in certain ways, if you have enough volume, definitely, but you can also test the position of all of these items. the number of these items. Are they going to change automatically, or do we expect the users to, let's say, click on those? So each of those clicks needs to be tracked in a way. How do we track these kinds of interactions? Yes, in Google Analytics with events. This is the additional part of tracking, which is needed for user interaction with elements on the site. So events actually tell the story. I have been on a specific page, but what did I do on the page? Did I scroll? Did I interact with any kind of a link? Did I play a YouTube video? Did I do anything which makes me more interesting to us as an agency, as a charter? This is valuable. Once you have this audience, once it's quite big, then in this case, create an audience and advertise only to them. Increase bids only to them. Because they are much higher in the purchase cycle and they are more likely to purchase, basically. So this is the part where analytics comes into play. What else can we measure? Sorry? Social links, okay. Outbound links, which are most common. So outbound links are all the links that lead from this domain to some other domain. So it can be Facebook, it can be a partner, it can be a booking engine, it can be anything. But basically, it's an outside of our domain space. What else? Clicks on call, basically on telephone number. But it's probably going to be much more valuable on mobile than on desktop. On desktop, you can probably call via Skype or WhatsApp or something like that. But in case of mobile, it's quite valuable to measure clicks on call as well. Because some people actually like to call rather than fill out the form. What else? This part. Internal search. So if I enter something like this inside this internal search engine, it basically provides me the results of all the content that it found on the site itself. First thing, do they even use this search widget? So that's the first thing to get. If it's not used, then it's probably better to remove it completely. The second thing, once they search for an item, do they click on the result or do they leave the site? So the quality of search engine, internal search engine, is also a question that you can answer in Google Analytics. The third thing is basically these keywords. In this case, I just put in location. It can be destination, it can be a type of boat, it can be anything in terms of this. So this information can be used in two ways. So the first way, use it in Google Ads campaigns or in SEO, things like that. Or the second one, these are items that users have a problem to find on the site. It's not easy to get to these parts of the site because they are not the main navigational items and so on and so on. So there are multiple ideas which you can get from just tracking this parameter inside Google Analytics. In this case, it's a parameter called S. So it's search query. Okay, what else can we track? Come on, ideas. It can be funny ideas. It can be simple ideas. It doesn't have to be complex. So we followed up with a search. We have key pages. We have interactions with the elements. What else can we track?
Hot areas of the page?
Yeah, like click maps and things like that. Google Analytics doesn't do that, right? It used to do it, and it did it badly. There is a different tool that you can use, which is also free. One is paid, one is free. So you can use Hotjar for a paid version of click maps, form filling, and everything else, user behaviors, screening, and so on. Hotjar is great, but it's a cost to have it. Not only to buy the tool, but also for a person that will analyze the results. So this is a two-part cost. Then a second tool is called Yandex Metrika. It's a Russian, basically free tool, which can also measure very similar things to Google Analytics, but it also has form analysis, which is actually great, form filling and things like that, and it can do web screening, basically, web recording sessions. You can actually see in video the complete session that the user creates, especially the ones that do errors and things like that. And you have click maps, heat maps, and scroll maps, and much, much more. So these scroll maps are usually used when you have long content pages. And by long, I mean this. This is a long content page. There is a lot of content to digest in a way. So it's always a question of, do they even get to this point? And then you can get, let's say, a very good number of the percentage of people who get to this page. How many of those did I get to, let's say, this part of the page? So then again, it's also a good insight of, should we keep this part, this widget, or not? Because in a way, it can be heavy, especially if this is an HTML5 video or something in the background, canvas, or I don't know what it is. But the point is, it's also one additional item for the user to load. And in this case, it's always a question if it's needed or not. Okay, so the task for you is like some kind of a homework assignment. When you get to your office, it doesn't have to be this week, you can do it next week. Just list the items you want to track on your site. There needs to be a control questions for all of those items. Once I get the result, what am I going to do with it? That's highly important, because don't measure things which you cannot control in the end. Basically, if you said that this part, let's say this part is part of an iframe, which is basically the booking part, then if you cannot change these, let's say, items and everything else, why even measure it in a way? Because you cannot change it. Measure things that you can actually influence. Why? Because you can then test by creating different variations of this content or removing parts of the content, and then see what the end effect is. Okay? So this is a control question. List all of the items. Don't reduce the list at once. Just be, let's say, rich with it, rich with ideas. They can be simple ideas, nice ideas, and so on. But the point is, once you do that, just reduce the list by having this control question in mind. Once I measure all of this, how can I use this information either to provide data to Google Ads or to do any kind of, let's say, site improvement? Okay, once you have this list, supply it to your developer and get an estimate of how much is it going to cost for all of these things to be implemented. And this is how Google Analytics is basically done. The reporting part is something completely different. We are going to do it in a different session, but this is the part of planning. Without it, Google Analytics doesn't make sense. Okay, thanks for this session. We are done, and see you after lunch at 3. Yes, thanks.